Hello everybody, it's your friend Mutsa here, and this is the third video in the series about the Lost Coast BDR-X. You'll find a link to the other videos in the series in the description below. And we start this video where we ended the previous one at the crossing of Usal Creek. We are going north on Usal Road, the famous Usal Road, and immediately after the bridge you can see on the left the access to Usal Beach and its campground. Coming up on the left now is the south end of the Lost Coast Trail. This is a very long trail that can take you all the way to Shelter Cove, Mato, and then Black Sands Beach. And now here on the right, the Hotel Gulch Campsite. Keep this name in mind, Hotel Gulch. We'll get back to it. There is a crossing here on Usal Road. To the right is Timber Hole Road. To the left is the Hotel Gulch Trail. These are very interesting names, and again we are going to revisit why the roads have these names. All the area here to the left side of Usal Road is part of the InterTribal Sinkyone Wilderness. It's a protected area. And there we go, I was just smacked on the head by a branch. This will happen quite a few times along the ride. This is the Usal Road South Gate. From here, there is a very long climb. The road goes up some 470 meters in 7 kilometers. In imperial units, that's about almost 1,600 feet in 4.5 miles. So this yields a gradient of about 7%. It's rather steep, and it's quite difficult to go up or down during the rainy season. I mentioned the rain and how difficult it may be to ride on Usal Road if it is wet. So let's talk a little bit about the weather in the Lost Coast. The rainy season typically goes from October to April, and during that time Usal Road is almost always closed. This video shows blue skies, but this is not common in the Lost Coast. The truth is that although not all days in my trip were this clear, I got very lucky. A typical day in the Lost Coast is cloudy, and an average year has some 200 overcast and nearly 100 rainy days. Also, the region is famous for its heavy fog, which may occur even at the top of the summer, particularly in the morning, due to the Pacific marine layer. This fog, in fact, plays a critical role in the region's ecosystems, and it's a key factor for the development and growth of features such as its thick redwood forests. This video is called Lost Coast BDR-X, but what do these words mean? Let's talk about each one of them, and we are going to start first with what is BDR. So BDR stands for Backcountry Discovery Routes, or depending how you pronounce it, Backcountry Discovery Routes. This is an organization in the United States that advocates for adventure and dual sport motorcycle riding. They create, they protect ride routes across the country. These are available on their website. It's ridebdr.com. This is a non-profit organization. It's all supported and run by volunteers. They do a tremendous service to the sport. And go to their website, check them out. They have lots of interesting things. I am a beginner adventure rider, and you'll find lots of interesting things that you can do. There are routes in the West Coast, also in New England. They have some routes now in Texas and also in the south of the country, in Georgia, for example. They are always releasing new routes and updating their routes. It's a very, very interesting organization. So now that we know what is the BDR, the next question is, what is a BDR-X? And what is a BDR-X? So a BDR-X, these are routes created by the BDR organization, which are typically shorter, and they're about 500 miles in length, and they are loop routes, so you start and you end in the same point. The traditional BDRs themselves, they are point-to-point routes, so you go from one place to another. And of course, these are off-pavement rides. And the BDR-Xs, they are shorter, and as I said, they are loop routes. So now we know what is BDR, the organization. We also know what is a BDR-X. And when we go to the BDR website, we see there is a number of BDR-X routes. There is BDR-X in Big Bend, Texas. There is the BDR-X in Ozarks in Arkansas. And now, since the end of 2025, there is a Lost Coast BDR-X. But what is Lost Coast? The Lost Coast is a section of the California North Coast. California coast is typically split in three sections: South Coast, Central Coast, and then North Coast. There is no formal definition of when one ends and the next one starts. I personally define the North Coast as the coast of California north of the San Francisco Bay. So there will be 5 counties there: Marin, Sonoma, Mendocino, Humboldt, and then finally Del Norte on the border with Oregon. And then within the North Coast, there is an area, there is a section called Lost Coast. And why Lost Coast? So the name Lost Coast is because it's an area which is very sparsely populated, the nature is pristine, and this is chiefly because the terrain is very, very steep by the coast, the access is very difficult, as you see on the series of videos. And Highway 1, which rides along nearly the entire Californian coast, avoids this area. It goes inwards, it goes into the continent and doesn't go along the coast. So there is an area between Hardy and Ferndale when there are really no coastal roads there. There is just some small paved roads by Mato, and we are going to be riding them on section 2. You see that we're going to ride there in the next videos, but that's why the Lost Coast is called Lost Coast, because it's very sparsely populated. Usal Road has a total length of 43 kilometers or 27 miles. For the purpose of this series of videos, I broke Usal Road into 3 segments. The first one from Highway 1 to Usal Creek, measuring 9.5 kilometers or 5.9 miles. The second one, which is the subject of this video, going from Usal Creek to Briceland Road, with a length of 29.6 kilometers or 18.4 miles. And finally, the third segment, going from Briceland Road to Chemise Mountain Road, with a length of 4 kilometers or 2.4 miles. A small apology here, there was a minor cut in the footage. We lost about 70 meters, some 200 feet of road. I'm using an Insta360 camera, and usually it records seamlessly, but in a moment like this, I think the footage is very data heavy with all the trees and everything else. The cache memory was not able to process everything, so there is this minor cut there. And as we saw shortly after the start of this section of the ride, we are still on a climb, and here we continue to climb along the timber ridge. Here I'm crossing a rain ditch, and as you can see, it was very easy, very uncomplicated. Overall, I found Usal Road to be in great condition. No erosions, no ruts, no fallouts, nothing like that. Even for a rider with limited experience like me, it was not complicated. Now, it's given that the road conditions can change a lot with the rains. The name Usal is quite curious, and I found two different theories to explain the origin of the name of the road. One is that the word Usal means south in the Pomo language. Pomo are a Native American people. They are native from the region there where the Usal Road is located. The second one is that the road was named after a company called USA Lumber. USA Lumber, USAL, and then Usal, the abbreviation. That was a company that built a sawmill at Usal Creek around 1889. And not only they built a sawmill, but they also built a wharf so the logs could be loaded into ships. And they built a railway going up the mountain, and they could then transport the logs down the mountains to the port. That company built a series of buildings. They built living quarters for the employees, and there was even a hotel at Usal Creek. Those buildings were progressively destroyed. The mill ceased operations in the early 20th century, and then in 1969 there was a large fire that destroyed the remnants of the buildings, and today there is nothing left there with the exception of the Usal Bridge itself. Frankly, I don't think that's a plausible explanation because the creek was already named Usal Creek before the company set a foot there. So I believe the right explanation for the name Usal is after the word south, the word in the Pomo language for south. Here to the left is Dark Creek and its Dark Gulch. We continue to climb on Timber Ridge, and the creeks located to the left, they are to the west. Those they flow straight into the ocean, and those to the right, they flow to the east, and ultimately they all feed into Usal Creek. At the beginning of the video, I asked you to remember the names Hotel Gulch and Timber Hole. Now let's take a look where these names come from. The name Hotel Gulch indicates the place where the hotel built by the USA Lumber Company, the Usal Company, was located. And Timber Hole is a reference to the road and the railway which were used by the USA Lumber Company to transport logs all the way to the forest to the wharf before they were transferred to ships. We have now reached the highest point of Usal Road on Timber Ridge at an altitude of almost exactly 500 meters or 1,640 feet. Here to the left we have Anderson Gulch and Anderson Creek. Anderson Creek is another one of those creeks that they run westward straight into the ocean. Here to our left, it's Wheeler Trail. This is one of the main trails of the InterTribal Sinkyone Wilderness area. And we are coming upon a series of tight and blind turns. This is why it's very important for you to ride on the right side of the road, or be careful on the left side. Always do that when you can look through the road. You can see high embankments here, very shady, and very, very blind these turns. Do not ride too wide. On the left here there is a steep ravine, and this is called the Waterfall Gulch. Coming up soon there will be also the Waterfall Creek, and this creek is different than the other ones. We are going to see why soon. Here on the left there is an access road through which you can get to Waterfall Creek. It's a very pretty area, very easy walk, just a couple of 100 meters long. This is one of the reasons when someone asks me how long should I take to do the Lost Coast BDR-X, I always say 5 days. Yes, you can do it in 4 days, and if you push really hard you can even do it in 3 days. But you'll be missing all these opportunities. It's much better to take your time, pause, take some pictures, talk to the locals. There is so much to be seen here. Do not rush through this experience. Here on the left is Waterfall Creek. Waterfall Creek is very interesting because it runs parallel to Usal Road in this area at the bottom of the Waterfall Gulch. On the other side of the gulch, beyond the creek, there is Sally Bell Grove, which is a tightly packed grove of mature trees. Here I am going down Timber Ridge. Timber Ridge runs north-south, and Usal Road runs along it, so the descent is rather mild. And I said earlier that Waterfall Creek is different than most creeks. We are going to see why. And oh, here I am again being smacked on my head by a branch. And what makes Waterfall Creek unique is that even though there are many creeks here in this area, Waterfall Creek is the only one besides Usal Creek where right here it's crossed by Usal Road. And that happens because there is a saddle here between Timber Ridge and the next one, which is Jackass Ridge. And right now we are starting right here to climb to on Jackass Ridge. So this makes Waterfall Creek very unique, even though there are many creeks in this area. Is a very wet area. Usal Road doesn't cross many of them. And right here to our right is the point where Waterfall Gulch is the deepest. Waterfall Creek flows towards Usal Creek. It flows first north and then east, and it becomes a Usal Creek tributary. coming upon erosion on the road, and I chose to take the left here because I saw by that tall tree there seemed to be a little bit of a rut, so I went to the left, but I was very careful to look through the turn to make sure there was no traffic coming on the opposite direction. This is very important, and looking back, once I went through this place, I realized that the rut was not deep. If I would do it again, I would have taken the right side. And here I am being smacked on the head again by a branch. Now I came upon this wash on the right side of the road, so I moved to the left, but again I was very careful peeking around the turn, through the turn, to make sure that was a safe thing to do. Always be careful, these roads are very narrow. The road here is a little bit over a vehicle wide, and there are large trucks going both ways in fact, but of course be particularly careful here, for example, this blind turn. And again, there is a wash here, so I go to the right, being careful. There is a lot of the field of view here is very good. There is a great angle here to see through the next turn as well. So just be careful when you need to ride left. Oh, just got hit on my head again by a branch, one of these low branches. And a second time again. Yeah, these branches are hitting my camera, the camera placed on the top of my helmet. I'm riding here with an Insta360 X3, 360 degree camera. My plan was actually to be using the X5 model, not the X3. The X5 is much superior. For example, the resolution is 8K versus 5.7K max with the X3. But the day I started the ride, I realized that the X5 only works with the internal battery installed, even if you use an external power pack. So luckily I had the X3 with me in my luggage and I could use it. That's another area here. Interesting to see how narrow the road is here. We were going down and now we are climbing up again, a little bit of a wash here on the right. We are continue to climb the Jackass Ridge. Again, the road rides along the ridge. As the ridge goes up and down, the road follows it. Another wash here on the right. So that's what I did. I had to retrieve my X3 for this ride, which is a pity because the X5 has much better video quality, especially in shady areas like this one. Much better contrast with the X5. Continuing now, we are climbing again on Jackass Ridge. continuing here to ride on Jackass Ridge, sometimes uphill, sometimes downhill, but mostly uphill. We continue to climb here, and to the left, meaning to the west, is the spring that feeds Jackass Creek. Jackass Creek is one of the longest creeks in the InterTribal Sinkyone Wilderness area, and on the other side to our right, meaning to the east, is Usal Creek. So here Jackass Ridge is squeezed between these two creeks, Jackass Creek to the west and Usal Creek to the east. By now I have been riding for about 1 hour, so I will just take a little break, drink some water, stretch a little bit, and I'll resume the ride. There are quite a few roads that stem off Usal Road. Most of them, they are dead ends, and like this one here on the right, this one goes for about 3 kilometers and then it dead ends into the forest. So be very careful if you take one of these roads. Most of them are in poor condition, and also please always observe the signage. Many of them they ride into conservation areas where the use of motor vehicles is forbidden. So please always ride on the designated areas and the designated roads. This section of Usal Road can be quite challenging in wet weather. As you can see here, there are ruts, there are slides, there are runoffs. So you need to be careful riding uphill or downhill if the road is wet. I was very fortunate because I was riding in dry weather, so it was relatively easy. And I was talking about Jackass Creek before. Jackass Creek has 3 forks. That is the Jackass Creek proper, and then there is the East Fork, which is here to my left, to the west. And right now we are approaching the highest point of this subsection of Usal Road. The altitude here is approximately 565 meters or 1860 feet approximately. It's the highest point, and now here to the right there is another of the secondary roads that stem off Usal Road. This one is another dead end. It goes for about 3 kilometers and then it dead ends in the forest. And once again, be very careful if you take one of these roads because most of them are in poor condition, and also always observe the signage because in many of these places, these are conservation areas where the use of motor vehicles is forbidden. pretty grove here of mature trees. And in this area here, as you guys can see, there is this embankment and the road is very narrow. We are coming out to a very special place because here to the right, just about 100 meters from the road, is the spring that feeds Usal Creek. And now right here there is this tricky Y-junction, is Moody Road on the right. You need to take the left on Usal Road. And we continue here on Usal Road. If you take Moody Road to the right, after about 300 meters, you are going to arrive to Kenny. And what is Kenny? So Kenny is a ghost town. There is nothing left to be seen there. Already in the 1980s, there were no remnants of buildings of any installations, construction there. But if you click on a map of California, many times there is this point on the map called the Kenny, and that's that ghost town there. And again, there is nothing to be seen there. Earlier, I mentioned the three forks of Jackass Creek. We are coming out here to the left, to the west, to the third fork, which is the North Fork of Jackass Creek. And here on the right, there is a road which was closed with logs. So again, this is if you take one of these secondary roads, be very careful, make sure the road is actually open and passable, because many of these secondary roads, they are in quite poor condition. This is a deceptively tight left turn. here, Usal Road exits the InterTribal Sinkyone Wilderness area, and from this point on, it nearly edges the Sinkyone Wilderness State Park. Now, the reason why I say it nearly edges is because the limits of the Sinkyone Wilderness State Park, which is located here to the left, to the west of the road, are not defined by the road in this area, but actually it's demarcated by a series of polygons. This is going to go on for a few miles until the T.E. Ledun area, the T.E. Ledun Conservation Area, of which we are going to be talking soon. And now coming upon a crest, and after this crest, you are going to see a dead-end trail here on the right. And now the descent from Jackass Ridge becomes more pronounced. It is a series of very tight turns, like this blind hairpin here. You need to be very careful, always looking through the turns. And as you can see, the road starts to descend more steeply from Jackass Ridge. We're now passing the trail to Anderson Creek, here on the right. And this is yet another tight and blind turn. At this point, Usal Road enters the C.E. Ledun Conservation Area. This area, measuring approximately 523 acres, was donated by Save the Redwoods League to the Sinkyone InterTribal Council in 2020 and is covered by lush redwood forest land. The word C.E. Ledun means in the Sinkyone language, fish run place. Now I'm riding here inside of the C.E. Ledun Conservation Area, and I'm coming upon a tight turn, and my body position is really report, no angle, and I just get beached outside of the turn. Manage to not drop the bike. Let's listen to my dialogue with myself.
Oh, there you go. Let's watch out for target fixation.
So what happened here? So even though I correctly pointed to target fixation, but that's not what caused the problem. So I did not react to the upcoming turn, right? My body position was pretty wrong. I did not position myself correctly for the turn, and when I came upon it, I was already past the turning point. Then I target fixated, looked outside to that embankment, and got stuck there. Now I managed not to drop the bike. This is a GSA, it's a pretty heavy bike with luggage. I'm riding alone. That's not a big deal. You can pick up the bike there, but it always, gets you tired. You may injure an ankle. But the lessons here is that you need always to be prepared for the turns, position your body properly. I did everything wrong there. I did a Lost Coast BDR-X in the first week of July, so Usal Road was nearly as dry as it can get, and this one here was, by my memory, the largest stream that I crossed. Yeah, it definitely sounds like I was having fun. Usal Road now exits the T.E. Ledun Conservation Area and enters the Sinkyone Wilderness State Park. Now, within the state park, Usal Road is an easement, so Usal Road is not part of the state park, which surrounds it. The Flat Rock Creek spring is located right here to the left of Usal Road. And unfortunately, finding abandoned cars by Usal Road is not all uncommon. as a long stretch of Usal Road runs along mountain ridges, it's not uncommon for the road to be surrounded by springs. Here, for example, is a spring to Anderson Creek, one of the longest in this area. And just a few hundred meters later, we come across the spring to Low Gap Creek. At this point, Usal Road exits Sinkyone Wilderness State Park. And now Usal Road re-enters the Sinkyone Wilderness State Park and again as an easement, so the road itself is not part of the park that surrounds it. Here on the right is Indian Creek Road, and it's followed by the Low Gap Trail that crosses Usal Road. And Low Gap Trail gives access to the Low Gap Camp, a campground. Indian Creek Road is quite interesting. It's a fairly long dirt road. It follows Indian Creek. And Indian Creek is it's interesting because it's one of the longest creeks in this area, and it goes all the way, flows all the way to the Eel River. The mouth of Indian Creek is just north of Piercy, so it's a fairly long creek. That's a very pretty area. This secondary road, Indian Road, it's an interesting detour that you may consider taking here. Alright, you are finally coming upon the north gate of Usal Road after 1 hour and 20 minutes of riding, And again, the raining season in this area goes from October to May, and in those months it's not uncommon for Usal Road to be closed. In fact, it's very often closed then. At this point, Usal Road leaves the Sinkyone Wilderness State Park and enters the Four Corners Conservation Area. This is a 164-acre property which was donated by the Save the Redwoods League to the InterTribal Sinkyone Council in 2012 to be a special conservation area. We continue our descent towards Four Corners. Four Corners is the name given to the crossing between Usal Road and Briceland Road. And here another border crossing, we go from the Four Corner Conservation Area to the King Range National Conservation Area. And we are finally arriving to Four Corners. That's the name of this crossing here. Usal Road continues straight ahead, and here we have Briceland. Now in the next video we are going to go down to Needle Rock, and then we continue on Usal Road. Thanks for watching. This was a very long one. I see you on the next one. Take care, guys. Ride safe.